As a preliminary matter, this is Woody Knight, Chair of the Newbury Planning Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Planning Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Pecos,
Yes, sir.
Larry Murphy,
Here.
Mary Stone,
Yes.
Scott Kenter,
Yes.
and Steve Mangian.
Aye.
Very good. Town staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Kristen Grubbs, Town Planner.
Yes. Hello.
Daniel LaRue, Assistant Planner.
Yes.
And Martha Taylor, I don't think she's joined us yet, but she'll be with us soon. She's our Special Projects Planner. Good evening. January 22nd, 2025, open meeting of the Newbury Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extends the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A 20, until March 31st, 2025. For this meeting, the Newbury Planning Board is convening by video conference via Zoom, as posted on the Planning Board's agenda, which can be found on the town's website. You may join us by going to http://zoom.us and entering meeting ID number 832-7141-3056, and the passcode is 108790. Or by calling in 1929-205-6099 US and entering meeting ID number and passcode when prompted. For Zoom meetings, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees are participating by video and or telephone conference. The meeting is also being broadcast live through local access channel 9 and on Zoom and at www.tnctv.org. And the recording will be available on the Newbury Access YouTube channel. Meeting business ground rules. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. As chair, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After speakers conclude their remarks, I will go down the list of board members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. The meeting tonight does not include any public hearings. However, after members have spoken, I will afford the public an opportunity to comment and or ask questions. I will seek questions and comments through the Zoom raise hand function in the order in which the people click on the raised hand button. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So that's that preamble out of the way. First item on the agenda. We have Steve Sawyer, Millennium Engineering, Florence Bushy Lane, owner Barry Kosha, trustee Bushy Real Estate Trust. Request to approve performance bond for security to reconstruct subdivision road between 21 and 27 Newman Road, the previous approved subdivision plan. At the request of the applicant, we're going to not do this evening. We're going to put them on the agenda for the next meeting. So that brings us to the next item on the agenda, old business. I have here housing production plan. And actually, before we do the housing production plan, let's do the proposed. We'll go back to the housing production plan. Actually, we have Martha now. Yes, hi Martha.
Hi, everybody.
Oh,
Yep.
Martha.
Now that Martha's here, we'll go to proposed zoning bylaw amendments for spring 2025 annual town meeting. And this is a review of them and to vote to refer to the select board. The first item on there is the Article 1 general provisions, and that's Martha.
Let me see if I'm working on a new laptop now, so I'm going to see if I can
Yep.
actually bring this up. All right, are you all able to see that?
Yes.
Yes,
Great. So this is really the same language that we reviewed at the last meeting on the 8th with no changes. And they're basically general provisions that town council has recommended that we add to our zoning to be consistent with Mass General Law. So I don't know if you want me to go over any of it or if you've all had a chance to review it before this. Or if you have any questions.
I have a chance to review it. If everyone else has had a chance to review it and are comfortable with that, we can move right on to questions if anyone has any questions for Martha. And if you haven't had a chance to review and would like her to go over it, please speak up. I'm not hearing questions, and I'm not hearing anyone saying that we want to go through it. So everyone is comfortable with the language before us?
So does anyone want to see that article we are looking at again? Should we go to
Is
the next
everyone-
one?
No questions on Article 1?
I'm fine with it as drafted.
Everyone else? Pete,
Yes.
Scott, Mary,
Yeah.
Steve, just yes, if you're happy with it. Okay. So we can go on then, Kristen, Article 4, regulations of overlay districts. Section 97-4E, flood hazard. That would be you.
Can you guys see this share screen?
Yes, yep, I can.
Okay. So Article 4 is the overlay districts. There are a number of these within Section 4, but letter E is flood hazard. So as we mentioned previously, so I cannot see the waiting room right now, just so you co-hosts know. Article 4 related to the flood hazard are modifications to update the town's bylaw, which we have had since 2012. Newbury has had the flood hazard bylaw approved by the town. The updates are required because the maps have been updated, the FEMA maps. So the language essentially reflects new dates. July 8th is when the new firm maps will go into effect. And in order for the town to stay in the National Flood Insurance Program, for our residents to be able to stay in that program, we need to get our bylaw up to date. So these changes have been reviewed by town council and reviewed by the floodplain staff at DCR. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions that anyone has.
Does anyone have any
Yes.
questions?
No, I don't.
Okay,
Not from me.
very good. If everyone's happy with that, we can go on to the next one, if that's okay with everyone. If you have any questions, please speak up now. Hearing none, we'll go on then to section 97-5D, common driveways. Goodness. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I believe I skipped one.
So Article 5 has several sections.
Yes.
Woody,
Yep.
so
Yep, I got ahead of myself. I apologize. So it would be,
that's okay.
the third one would be Article 5, special permits, general. And there's 5 of them here. The first one is general 97-5A.
Right, and just to note, when Kristen and Daniel and I spoke last week, we agreed that actually, since we have some very specific special permits underneath within this article, as well as general requirements, that it made sense to us to actually delete the word general. So this article would become named special permits. And then 97-5 would be special permits, and then the general requirements are underneath that. And these are the general requirements that town council had suggested that we add to the bylaw, since we don't really have any criteria right now for uses that require a special permit that isn't otherwise outlined within this article, such as wind and solar and that kind of thing. So it includes the decision-making criteria and conditions which may be imposed on special permits, provision for waivers, and lapse of the special permit. And again, this is all language from town council. So any questions on those?
I have none.
I don't have any. No,
Nope.
no.
No,
Very good. So that's Article 5.
So that's part of Article 5. The next section of this, we're not including any changes to B right now, which is bed and breakfast. We'll deal with that. If there are any changes, that will be in the next phase of the recodification. So the next section that we're looking at is C, which is the open space residential development. We went through this briefly last time, and again, in reviewing it with Kristen and Daniel, there are a few additional suggestions that we made, going down to basic maximum number, which is 2A. We had talked last time about perhaps trying to modify and clarify that, but in looking at the provision in the bylaw, it actually refers to the OSRD yield plan requirements. So it seemed, after discussing it, it seems to us that it's really more appropriate to make any revisions to the yield plan requirements within the OSRD rules and regulations, as opposed to doing it in the bylaw. So that's the first change. It's a little different from what we discussed last time, because the yield plan really lays out in the OSRD regulations, it really lays out what's expected in the yield plan. And I think that's what we need to take a look at to try to clarify that whole process and the distinction between lots and units. There is language also regarding ability to support septic systems and that kind of thing. So if the board is in agreement, we would recommend actually not making any change to this provision 2A right now.
Good enough for me.
And then having a separate process, which would be a public hearing to amend the rules and regulations.
But it does have the advantage, if in the future, if we need to make any amendments, we don't have to go back to town meeting.
That's correct. So going down, I think most of the rest of this is consistent with what we talked about last time. We had the change regarding subsurface systems. Oh, here's O2 here. Town council had recommended that we add some language regarding streets in a condominium development as well as a subdivision. And the recommendation was that if an OSRD is being developed as a condominium and not a subdivision, the roadway still needs to meet the subdivision design and construction standards. So we've added that in this provision here, which speaks to streets. So that's the bold underlined language there. Yeah, I had some of these highlighted on my version, but this is fine.
So, is there something else you want me to stop at?
No, I think the only, the board took the straw vote last week on, or at the last meeting about the open space subsurface being part of the open space. So I think that's fine. Which is this provision right here.
Yeah, and there was this change.
Right, which we discussed last time. So I think that's it for this one.
Okay, I'm comfortable with it. Everybody else comfortable? If you have any questions, please speak up.
I'm good with it.
Me too.
Yes.
Very good. So we can go on. Martha, the next one would be the common driveway?
The next one's a common driveway, and the only change that we discussed last time was actually making reference to the planning board's rules and regulations. But again, in going through it a little bit further, I was reminded of the bittersweet process that we went through, where they were actually common driveway design specifications, and in that case, there were several that were appropriate to waive, but there was no provision in the bylaw for the board to waive those requirements, and ended up having to go to the ZBA for a variance.
Yes.
So the suggestion here would be to actually provide a mechanism for the planning board to waive those requirements. And the language is highlighted if the board deems the waiver is in the public interest and does not impact public safety. We have not yet reviewed this provision or this language with town council, so obviously we want to do that. But when we were going through that process before, I think we were all in agreement that if that language were in the bylaw, then the board would have had the discretion to make those waivers. Because it ended up being quite a cumbersome process for the applicant to have to go to the ZBA, stop the public hearing, go to the ZBA, get the variance, and come back. So I guess the question to you all, does that seem to make sense?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
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 All right. And then the only other change was the reference to the submission requirements, because what's here is inconsistent with what's actually on the application form. And then moving down, town council, oh, I'm sorry, anything about that?
Nope.
And then moving down there, no proposed changes at this time to sections E and F, which are the wind and solar bylaws. So moving down, this again has come from town council, and these are the two marijuana bylaws. The first one, G, which you see is all struck out here, specifically references medical marijuana treatment centers. And since the recreational marijuana bylaw was passed, it seems that the two can actually be combined. So council has recommended placing, just adding references to medical marijuana treatment centers to our marijuana establishments. And we haven't shown that here, but that would probably be then a matter of renumbering this to G.
Is H the last one, Martha?
H is the last one.
Okay. I know in other places we've just left G kind of blank, so as not to conflict with any other references, but probably in this case, there aren't any. I don't know. Do we know if there are any references to H
Um,
elsewhere in the zoning bylaw?
I can't think of any, except possibly in the definitions, which will ultimately get moved over for any that aren't in the bylaw right now. So I don't think so, but we should double check on that.
Okay. Yeah, so we're just talking about what this is called here. So we'll figure that out. Just put it on. That's it for this one.
Anyone have any questions on this? Or are they comfortable with it?
Yes, we, thank you.
Good.
I am as well. Larry, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Pete,
Yes.
you're all set?
Yep.
Yep,
thank
very
you.
good. Okay. So with that said, we can continue on to Article, is that Article 9, Special Regulations, Section 97-9, a site plan review. I don't believe I just skipped something. No, that's the next one.
So at the last meeting, we talked about one change to this, which is down towards the end, having to do with pre-construction meetings, and that language was recommended by our stormwater consultant, Renee Boudreau, to make it consistent with the requirements of our MS4 general permit. And the language specifically was to review the stormwater practices and controls to make sure that that's done prior to start of construction. In addition, Kristen, if you can scroll back up, under design criteria, we talked about adding another criterion, which is a new
Sorry, I just wanted to show that
yeah,
this is
decision.
under this decision criteria category. just so
Right,
people
right.
Can see that beginning part.
And this would be to add a criteria so that the board would consider the extent to which the project utilizes energy, water, and resource efficient design to the greatest degree possible, including appropriate building orientation, landscape design, use of solar or other energy collection apparatuses, electric vehicle charging stations, light fixtures, and use of resource efficient materials and energy and water efficient systems. The criteria really don't address any of those considerations right now. So the question would be, does the board feel comfortable adding that language, those considerations as decision criteria?
I'm comfortable with it. Anyone have any questions or like to express?
Seems very appropriate.
Very good. Everyone else comfortable with it?
I am.
Adding this language?
Martha, I have one other thing though.
Yes.
On 6H. Because I think we kind of got burnt with this in the past. Minimize intrusion of glare from headlights and site lighting on surrounding properties.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in time, we had talked about trying to follow dark sky compliant guidelines, and it was somewhere in something that we had, and I don't remember where that was. Do you?
I know that we had discussions about potentially adopting a lighting bylaw with dark sky compliant, requirements.
Right. But we don't have the bylaws, and I get that, but if we were to somehow use some sort of language, consistent with dark sky, you know, uh, um, you know, I don't know, I'm not finding the right words right now, but somehow put it in here, because every time I see that glare from Route 1, I just think about this.
I know, I do too. I was driving by it the other night and I was thinking about it.
And we have it pre-existing in a couple other areas of the town. But, going forward, I think would, make sense, and continuing again with the culture of the town and the community and our, natural, habitat, that we be, considerate and consistent with that.
Right, so I guess the question would be whether we would add some language in H to that effect, or modify the new N, where it talks about LED light fixtures, but maybe some reference to,
Because I think, and, goes with new technologies and all.
yeah,
And so I think leave all the new technologies the way they are, but within our H saying, site lighting, consistent with, dark sky. I need another word or two here.
yeah.
Larry, where are you with the words?
Yeah, I agree with your intent. I'm having a hard time coming up with the right terminology myself. What is it? Is dark? Dark
It's dark sky,
compliance.
Compliant guidelines,
Who
criteria.
who publishes or who's responsible for drafting dark sky compliance? I mean, where does it come from, I guess?
There is actually something, I want to see if I can find it.
yeah, I'm trying to find it too.
Does it
So
mean,
it's-
is it just a catch-all phrase?
There's actually Dark Sky International,
National, right.
and they have 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting.
Useful, targeted, low level, controlled, and warm colored. And there's something else too, because I remember looking at this before, Martha.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be something consistent with dark sky lighting principles or practices.
Lighting ordinances. Let me see.
Or and site lighting minimize light pollution in accordance with dark sky.
Scott, have you run across this at all?
I mean, I'm looking at myself, I see, really the dark sky compliance standards.
Yep.
The first, before I open up the article, it says that fixture must be fully shielded and emit no light above the horizontal plane. And I think that's probably the horizontal plane of the shield.
Creating codes and statutes.
Well, I think, Scott, what you just said, maybe, consistent, what is it, consistent with dark,
Dark sky to recognize codes and statuses and statutes.
well, they're not really codes and statutes. I think in compliance with, what was the word you used, Scott?
Standards.
Compliance standards.
With dark sky compliance standards.
No, I think you had it, Martha, consistent with dark sky compliance standards. So compliance comes after sky. I'm fine with the intent. Would probably want to run that language by town council to make sure that it's definitive enough, you know?
Yeah.
That,
just gonna-
that there's a standard that can be understood and met.
Right. So minimize intrusion of glare from headlights and sight lighting on surrounding whatever it is, and minimize light pollution consistent with dark sky compliance standards, something like that.
Yeah.
Mm,
Thanks,
And if
guys.
everyone- Yes, I think it's great. Good job, Pete. And if everyone's happy with the intent of this language, if it is to change council's review, if everyone was okay with that, then so be it, because I think it's important that that's here.
No, I think so too, and thanks for bringing that up, Pete. Yeah, I think if you guys are okay with us wordsmithing it a little bit more and running it by town council, we can work with that.
I'm comfortable with that. But if anyone isn't, please speak up.
Okay, thank you.
That brings us to Article 10. General Regulations, 97-10C. Customary home occupation. Excuse me. Occupations.
So we discussed this one last time as well, and this was the change to basically make it clear that if a use requires a special permit under our table of regulations, it cannot be permitted by the building commissioner as a customary home occupation. It requires that special permit. And town council has seen this language, and she feels that addresses the concern.
Good.
I'm happy with that. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Everybody
I'm good.
comfortable with that? Larry's comfortable. Hearing nothing. We can move on then. The next one would be, what's the place here? General regulations. Section 97-10D. Accessory apartments. That's Daniel.
Yeah, so last meeting, if I remember correctly, the discussion was around the definition of short-term rental. And so we had a discussion with town council last week, and it was basically said that is the definition of short-term rental. And it was basically encouraged that the board, if they want to determine the length of time for a short-term rental, could weigh in at a later date and time for this one, as the law is coming into effect on February 2nd, and we want to be compliant. So that was really what was reported in terms of the definition. And excuse me, I don't believe there was any other edits, and so we haven't updated any other edits besides that.
Can't even
So-
find that. Do you guys, where is that short-term rental?
And
language?
that's, we're limited to 31 days for now because of the February 2nd deadline.
Right, so Daniel, when do we weigh in on that again?
So it was encouraged that the planning board, once it gets through all town meeting, that the planning board could then revisit this at their leisure and determine what they wanted to do. Because there was some really good conversations around 3-month limit, 6-month limit, etc. So again, town council at the meeting, we ran that up the chain. It was encouraged that you guys kind of take on the definition of 31 days or less for short-term rental, and then could revisit it once this has been approved and moved on.
I
So
think
it's not-
if I may, council's other point was that we currently don't have any short-term rental regulations in place, and she thought it would be beneficial for us to have those in place.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Martha.
You're welcome. So that's, once we do that, we can come back and revisit the short-term rental provisions in the ADU bylaw.
I'm comfortable with that to be certain to return.
Okay.
Everyone else, any other comments, anyone? I'm comfortable with myself. For now. So we'll move on to the next one. Article 11. Administration, that's Martha.
So the first portion of this, again, we discussed this at the last meeting, has to do largely with additional language regarding building permits and building commissioner, building permit requirements. This is all language that town council advised that we include in this administration section. And then going down, she did add some language regarding variances. We do have a question on that because she's noted dimensional variances here. There actually is a provision in the Plum Island Overlay District regarding use variances. So that's something that we want to have a further discussion with her about on this particular language. The next section was section C, which had to do with the special permit requirements. That's all been moved to Article 5, but we're suggesting that we keep section C as a heading and call it reserved, because there probably are other articles within the bylaw which refer to section D, which are all the written definitions. Originally, I was thinking we could just change D to C, but we don't want to create any internal inconsistencies. So we felt that it would be best to keep D as the definitions for now. And then, as noted, the last version you saw had a number of definitions crossed out because the intention was to move them to the specific bylaws to which they pertain. But most of those aren't being changed right now. So we've deleted the strikeout for those. There are still a few that we are having discussions about. One is the definition of, the definitions for dwelling. We made a few amendments to those and reordered it. The last version said dwelling unit, single family dwelling unit, two family dwelling unit, multifamily. We deleted the word unit in those three definitions since it didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. So you see that slight modification here. Under fence, the way it read previously was any structure constructed of, and then including but not limited to. So we're suggesting adding the words natural or manufactured materials after constructed of, and then saying including but not limited to. And the next one we're still discussing is building height. This is a revised version which is based on the definition of building height that a number of other municipalities have, which refers specifically to how it's measured for flat roofs, to mansard roofs, and to sloped roofs, including gable, hip, salt box, gambrel, and also with some exclusions of appurtenances which don't come into the building height definition. I've sent that to Eric Swan, the chair of the ZBA, because it's really the ZBA that's been struggling with the building height definition, particularly for projects down on Plum Island. So we're waiting to get some feedback from him on that. I don't know whether this will be discussed at the next week's ZBA meeting, but this is one proposal which seems to clarify how that measurement is taken. It's still from mean grade to, to these various different height determinations.
I have a question, Martha.
Sure.
What is the deck line of a mansard roof?
So if you look at a mansard, there's a portion that's very steeply sloped, and that's usually encloses living space, like second story. And then there's a sharp change in angle to a portion of the roof which is much lower slope. And
Right.
so the deck line is that point between the steep slope and the lower slope.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah,
And the steep part can usually include windows because it's in the living space, right, Martha?
That's correct. I mean, usually they're kind of dormered windows, but it's usually living space, and it's a second or third story typically.
Yeah, mansard roofs are typically four-sided, aren't they?
They are, yes.
I can think of a few in Newburyport, but I can't think of any in Newbury.
I think 85 High Road, the Perkins House, I think that's a mansard roof. I'm trying to think of others. And there's another one on High Road, just north of the old town hall on the opposite side of the street, I think. A couple houses
Oh,
up
yeah.
from the gas station.
Yep, you're correct. I think it's red.
Yes.
I know there's one on 420 Merrimack Street, Newburyport. If you were to Google the address, pop up.
Right, but there aren't a whole lot in Newbury.
So Martha, just a comment here. I've seen some very large cupolas.
Yes, and so the key to that, I think, is not intended for human habitation. And this is actually something that the ZBA may be concerned about, because on a lot of the projects down on Plum Island, you'll have like a cupola or a doghouse or something that will provide access out onto a roof deck. And they're specifically supposed to be designed so they're not habitable. It's just the stairs and the door out. So if it were something that were habitable, could actually be considered a room, then that would be part of the roof height. But I mean, your point is well taken, and I think the ZBA may have some discussion about that.
And then it could even be a third story. If indeed it's a room.
Right, which it's, it's not supposed to be, obviously. So I'm not, as I said, this is still a work in progress.
Due to the ZBA review.
Yes, and, to make sure that it does, address the question that Pete just asked, to make sure that if a cupola is not considered, or if the building height restrictions don't apply to that it's something that is going to be a very small thing and not be habitable space.
Anyone else have any other questions? All
So
right.
Martha, I mean, how do we move forward with this then? Because the planning board needs to refer it tonight So if the planning board's comfortable with this, then the select board reviews it. But that will all start to happen before the ZBA meeting.
Right, I mean, I think the important thing really is to move forward with the thought that there will be a modification to the change of building height. And there's still some opportunity for changing that. If there's I mean, I personally don't think that the language needs to be 100% set right now.
So during the planning board hearing in February, there could be modifications, minor modifications.
Minor
to
mo-
the
minor-
definition.
Yeah, minor modifications to it.
Okay. I just thought that might be helpful for the planning board to understand what going forward, if there were to be a change.
So, and basically what you're saying is we can approve this and vote on it tonight with the notion that we can make a few minor modifications in public hearing in February. Correct? Right?
Yes, yeah.
Very good. All right, does anyone have any questions about anything? Martha, that was the last thing for,
Yeah, I think the last one that's still a work in progress is the definition, well, two things, on lot frontage. We had talked last time about the fact that in Newbury, at least for corner lots, the frontage can be one side or the other, so the front yard setback needs to be adhered to only on one side, and the other would be considered a side yard setback. The practice has been for the property owner to designate which is going to be the front yard. Or if we talked about if the owner doesn't do that, it could be the frontage that's the longest length. So that language has been inserted here. So when a lot is bounded by more than one street, frontage shall be on the street designated by the property owner, or if not so designated, on the street with the longest frontage. And I also had a question on that one, the part that's highlighted with the comment, wondering whether the language that reads right now, to which the owner of the lot has a legal right of access and to which the owner could provide for vehicular access from the principal building or a required parking space. I was wondering whether that could be simplified to just read to the continuous portion of the line separating a lot from a street, providing physical or legal access to the dwelling. I can't actually see. Yeah, physical and legal access to the lot. That's also something that we have not run by town council yet, or haven't gotten any feedback on. But the language seems a little bit confusing right now. So I don't know if you all have any thoughts about that.
Anyone have any thoughts about that one?
Interior angle. What is that? Where is that? The interior angle.
Of more than 135 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we're sort of talking about lots which have boundaries which meet at right angles, but
Right.
135 degrees would be if say the front yard and side, well, if it's a corner lot and it's a getting my geometry mixed up now, but if the if the two property lines that meet at the corner are greater than 90 degrees or greater than 135 degrees, their combined frontage is what makes the frontage. It would be easier if I could do a diagram.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'm just confused.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier with
Yeah, it's, I'm trying to grab it, but I can't. Anyway. I'm not that BRITE either, so I can't, I just don't get. Algebra and everything about this. Degrees and. But you're an architect. Mark.
yeah, yes.
You have an excuse.
I'm not explaining it very well.
I know. I know, I expected more. I expected more, Martha.
Right, I know.
You're not delivering on your promises here.
I know. A picture's worth 1,000 words.
It's so totally true.
Is
I
it
guess it
something that you
means
could-
if it's wide, right?
Right,
Wider,
Right. If it's,
wider, then all of it can be used as frontage, right?
right.
Okay, that makes sense.
If it's a gentle curve rather than a sharp angle, I think is the point, if
For
I
some
understand
reason,
it correctly.
135 is like the magic number between where it looks more like closer to a line than a corner.
Okay.
I'm no architect.
I don't know how to.
Well,
Well, this
There's
is really
still a corner though. I mean, I find this a little weird as well, Mary, because there's still a corner.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be simpler, that's what I'm saying. If I could grasp the
Well,
the right words, I would have written you a longer letter if I'd had more time. What is
if you
that?
picture
Shorter
this,
letter.
180 degrees would be a straight line, and 90 would be obviously 90 degrees, right, Martha?
right. So this is about halfway in between. I think actually Newburyport zoning has a diagram, which unfortunately I'm afraid to call anything up right now.
Never know what we might find.
Well,
Well,
I think what we should decide is if we're comfortable with this, or if we think it needs more time, then we can not change it right now.
I don't think it needs more time. I just think we need to find a word, a phrase that actually describes it. And as Martha said, if there were a diagram, then we wouldn't have to go into all this detail. But right now, anyway, I should come up with something, never mind whining about it.
So I'm trying
Kristen, I
to.
have a picture here that I could share. I don't know if we want to risk sharing screens, but I have a picture that kind of demonstrates the interior 135, if that helps.
Everyone's scared.
Here we go. Hold yourself. Here we go.
Roll the dice.
Can you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
There it is.
So,
Very.
so that 135 right there.
Right,
Look at
right.
that straight line. And then you've got 135. That's the yard. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving or not, but
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
that would be the yard. So this would all be frontage if it's greater than 135. I know it's a box, it's not a street. You have to imagine this is the street lot, but this would be the yard. And the house is over here somewhere. So
okay.
And someone would have to have a survey that documents definitively the angle in order to use this.
And if it's less than 135, then it would just be front yard, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
owner would have to choose.
Right, it would be one side or the other.
Right.
One side or the other. Okay.
I hope that was helpful. I don't know if that would.
It was for me. I understand it, but it was also very.
find where we were. 11.
Is everybody
11.
comfortable with that, or to move on with that? And if Martha gets any feedback on that, we can discuss it in February.
And quite honestly, the most important part of that definition, we don't have a definition of lot frontage right now. The most important part is that it's measured as one continuous line.
Martha, for the next edition, can you provide a diagram which would put into the rule?
Yeah, we haven't, I mean, I've been looking at several, like there was one that I saw going back to the roof height that had a diagram for each of those different things, like the different, the deck line on a mansard roof. We haven't done that, but I think I agree it would be helpful. So we could look at trying to insert some diagrams in here.
Just in this section, Martha, or others?
In this section in particular.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense to me. It's very confusing, extraordinarily confusing.
A picture is worth 1,000 words.
I think-
Yeah, no, it's very it's very hard to visualize some of these things.
I know it is. But once you see them, you're like, oh, duh, got it. Okay. So that's to be continued, guys? Is that where we went with this?
Yeah, that needs a little more work.
Okay, all right. Sounds good to me.
And then I think the last one that really needs some additional clarification is the definition of structure. In looking at it more closely, the way it was, the language that was bold and underlined was actually several different options for the definition, or appeared to be. So, our original definition is that which is built or constructed, excluding ground level driveways and walkways and fences and retaining walls. And then one option, which is separated by or here, a combination of materials assembled for occupancy or use, such as a building, bridge, trestle, tower framework, retaining wall, tank, tunnel, tent, stadium, reviewing stand, platform, shelters, piers, wharves, bin, fence, sign, or the like. So that would be one definition. Or another definition would be a combination of materials which may or may not constitute a building that is erected, pieced, or constructed to form a configuration. And in that case, I think the rest of the sentence structures include but are not limited to would define that second option. So I did find a couple of other definitions. This one is from Ipswich. Any constructed, erected, or placed material or combination of materials in or upon the ground to give support or shelter, including but not limited to buildings, mobile homes, radio towers, sheds, signs, and storage bins, swimming pools, tennis courts, platforms, and fences. The word structure shall be construed where the context allows, as though followed by the words or part thereof. Newburyport's definition is a combination of materials which may or may not constitute a building that is erected, placed, or constructed to form a configuration. So
Martha, can you remind me, at least maybe others, why has there been problems with what we've had? Like, where is this relevant to the bylaw?
This one, to be honest, I'm not sure. It was language that was suggested by town council, I think, uh, to amplify and clarify our definition. It's not something that I've seen the ZBA struggling with. I don't know, Larry, if you've seen them struggling with it or not.
No.
I mean, is there something specific to a structure? That is, like, who has to name something a structure?
And it's something that mostly I think the building commissioner would deal with, like a structure is something that could require a building permit. Which is why in the previous definition, we had excluded driveways and walkways. Although retaining walls actually, well, they need engineering if they're over 4 feet tall. So I'm not really quite sure what the genesis of this change is.
So we did have a conversation with the building commissioner who pointed to the definition in the building code, which is very simplified. And apparently there's, Dan, correct me, but there's like a footnote that says intentionally open to interpretation by the building inspector. Like,
Yeah,
there's a lack of specificity in order to allow a building commissioner to interpret it.
yeah, when I spoke to Peter, the Mass Building Code was intentionally vague. So it's open to interpretation by the building commissioner.
So I'll just share, I currently am feeling like this is hard to figure out what's best, and in which case maybe we keep it simple. But because there wasn't a recommendation from the building commissioner on this.
And when you spoke with him, did he have, is he comfortable with the building code definition? Should we just put that in here?
I mean, he and I had a brief conversation that he said themselves when they write the building code, it's intentionally vague so the building commissioners can interpret it. And again, similarly to the other stuff that we've discussed this evening, if the board feels like they need a little more time, this could be something in February as a minor modification.
Well, who came up with this language?
This was in a draft of recommended definition revisions from town council.
Well, no. It looks to me like town council is maybe trying to plug some loopholes. But
Yeah, I think that was the intention.
Can you leave things open to interpretation? So that's a very subjective thing. There's no rule, guideline, framework, correct?
It's almost like a double-edged sword when you leave it open to interpretation.
Mhm.
It can be beneficial or it can be non-beneficial.
Right.
That's why a lot of explanation and definition is sometimes helpful. With, a caveat of, some language at the end to say, or additional considerations or something, as we always try to do when we construct things, design things. I want to stay away from construction designing words.
So
I am comfortable with, actually I'm comfortable with, legal, I'm always comfortable with legal guidance. I think there's a reason that legal guidance is recommended, because there's usually issues that have occurred, and that's why the recommendations are made.
yeah, I agree with you, Pete.
I agree as well.
Yeah.
So I guess
Which one do we like better? Here's the or.
I'm almost of the or a combination of materials. It kind of follows very closely to what Newburyport has. If I heard it correctly, is that right, Martha?
Yeah, I think these last two sentences, a combination of materials which may or may not constitute a building, all of that is pretty much Newburyport's definition.
Let me ask Scott. Scott, what do you think?
I think highlighted in red, I think it's fine. I like legal counsel, keeps me out of trouble. Keeps the town out of trouble. I'd be okay, either way, but, it's highlighted in red, it's, somebody else is using it, right? And, it's in Newburyport's, bylaws, so again, I'm comfortable.
Which one is Newburyport's, Martha?
It's the
They-
last portion of it. So it's after the second or, a combination of materials which may or may not constitute a building. So the last two sentences of this definition as written,
So what I have highlighted right now.
yes.
Yeah, and we have to choose from what was just highlighted as opposed to what's all in red. Other than to the or.
Yeah, because what's all in red appears to be two separate definitions. So I think that's why town council put the or in there.
How about that? How do we like that?
I'm comfortable with that. It's not entirely up to me.
Pete, I mean, are you and or, I mean,
Yeah,
You
I'm
need-
not sure that was an either or either.
Yeah.
yeah, me neither.
I mean, I might put an or after retaining walls, but other than that.
If we go with all the languages that's in red and have that A as a small a,
But it's redundant because you've got
it
two
is.
different
is.
definitions of a combination of materials.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is redundant. I'd be okay with, really the new report, language. Which is,
A combination of materials which may or may not constitute a building and everything that comes after that.
yes.
I'm comfortable with that too. Which would be the second. Correct?
No, it's fine. I mean, it's fine.
So we're deleting the first sentence or adding this to, like, what do we do with this? We keeping that?
I think that the intention was to strike that and to replace it with one of those two options.
I'm content with the second one.
So all of this gets struck.
Well, the part that's highlighted in bold right now doesn't exist. So the only part that would actually get struck would be the portion that reads that which is built or constructed, excluding ground level driveways and walkways and retaining walls and fences.
You don't think we need to make clear that ground level driveways and walkways and fences and retaining walls are excluded?
And the other option is to keep exactly what we have right now. Again, I'm not quite sure why council suggested some alternative language.
Well, I just was, there's nothing like group writing, but I just was wondering if we could keep what we have and add, or, so it's, a structure is that which is built or constructed excluding ground level driveways and walkways, fences and retaining walls, comma, or a combination of materials which may or may not constitute a building that is erected, placed, or constructed. So it, both. That would disappear. I don't know. I think we have public attendees waiting to talk about HPP, so maybe we can take a straw poll on this and then put it in the category of there may be modifications.
Kristen, what would you replace the word configuration with? Because I don't like that word. I don't. It could be anything. I guess that's the point, right? Is there a different definition somewhere of configuration? To form a configuration. Huh?
Yeah, I don't know what that means either.
You know, I don't get it. The word is wrong. I think, but I don't know if is it a legal term, Larry? Configuration?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, it's just common usage,
In this case, I'm not.
whatever the common understanding of the word is.
It's not a big deal. Not a big deal, you guys.
How do you feel about it, Larry? What do you think?
Larry or Mary?
Larry?
Larry.
You could leave it all for now.
Okay,
I mean, yeah, which is materials assembled for such as a building. Yeah, I suppose it's.
Kristen, if you could just, cut a combination of materials assembled, that paragraph, just so we could take a look at it. And then, with your change, what was that, comma? A combination.
Well, I'm not sure if we need to strike what we currently have, this first part. If that's gone, then the definition is a.
No, I'm not saying strike that, I'm just, I think if you kept that, comma, a combination materials, I think Mary has an issue with configuration.
I'm not gonna stop the process just for that, but I was just, it left me cold. I don't get it. So.
Yeah, it is kind of a strange word in this
I don't know.
in this context. I'm looking for some synonyms. Not coming up with a good one. Assembly.
Place or electric place or. Do we need it?
I don't know. I think if you all are sort of comfortable with the basic definition that we have now, and if we could go back and think about this one a little bit more as well, try to find a better word than configuration. So we can move forward.
Yep.
I mean, what you have up there right now is not bad.
No,
Correct. No,
That which is built or constructed excluding ground level driveways and walkways and fences and retaining walls, comma, or a combination of materials which may or may not constitute a building that is erected, placed, or constructed. Structures include, but are not limited to, etc. I think that reads. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I just took configuration out, Mary. What do you think?
you're asking me or Larry?
Mary,
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
took
good.
your word out. I deleted configuration.
Yeah.
Are you
take
good
that.
with it?
I'm not sure what it means, that's all. So if I don't, then maybe some other people don't. But I don't understand if this is, Larry, is this written for legal reasons in case there's a controversy?
Yeah,
Is- if they're thinking-
exactly.
Sorry?
He said yes, exactly.
Yeah, so someone
Okay, got it. All right, then,
is built or constructed. That which is built or constructed.
right. But aren't they the same? Built and constructed?
Yeah, I mean, that which is built or constructed is pretty broad. And I think they're trying to better define what they mean, would give it a
Right.
little more specificity.
Sure.
I think that's what's going on here.
And is that necessary legally, Larry?
Well, the problem is if something it is too. I mean, you've got to warn people, you've got to warn property owners what they can or cannot do.
Right,
That's the problem. If it's too loose, there's an argument that they're not,
being specific.
notified of not expressing this very well, but I think you see my point.
Yep, I do.
There's got to be enough definition that people know what the rules are, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
Without going so far that you don't want to, little picket fence along the front property line to be that would have to, for example, meet the setback requirements or something like that.
Mm.
Well, I mean, I would say move on with this language and let's have town council take another look at it.
Yeah, I think it's, it's passable, but it's a little bit too open-ended for me, or possibilities to interpret one way or the other instead of being straightforward and easy to understand.
Well, we can stick with this one now, and that's something we can address in February as a minor modification after some town council review, correct?
Yeah, I think the important thing right now for public hearing purposes is that people know that the board is considering an amendment to the definition of structure.
Right. Good one.
Okay. So, Kristen, is that it, Martha, or did you have any more?
That was it. The only other definition that was added was the one for zoning map, which we discussed last time, which is really this kind of the set of maps.
Right.
So that was it.
Okay. So, Kristen, the next step here, so we can send this off to the select board is entertain a motion to vote on all 7 warrant articles. Is there any need to separate them? We can vote on them all as 7 warrant articles, one vote.
Yeah, and you're reminding me by saying 7, something that Martha's probably about to say, which is there's also, it's not drafted yet, but there is language that is a housekeeping that needs approval at town meeting, and so we're not sure if it'll be bundled into that first general provisions article or a separate warrant article, and the content of that includes the general edits such as changing selectmen to board of select board, changing by hyphen law to bylaw, one word, authorizing the planning director to establish a table of contents for the zoning bylaw. So there are a few things in that category that we don't have a warrant article drafted for yet, but there will also be an article for that. And
Okay.
Martha, chime in if I missed anything important.
No, I think those were the 3 really kind of housekeeping things that need to be addressed.
Okay,
So there might be 5. So the slate can be voted all together if everyone's comfortable with that. That can be one vote, I think.
Yeah, so I think the vote could be, something like voting to refer all of the proposed amendments to the select board for referral back for public hearing.
Well, I'll make that motion.
And I will
Okay.
second that motion.
No,
Thank you.
second. Third.
All those in favor, roll call vote. Peter,
Absolutely.
Larry,
Yes.
Mary,
Indeed, yes.
Scott,
Yes.
and Steve, how do you feel?
I'm good.
You're good, very good. So that will be sent off to the select.
Woody, you're gonna vote?
Oh, yes, I vote yes as well. Thank you, Larry. Sorry. The chair votes yeses. Okay. So that'll be sent off to the select board and we can make minor modifications in February if need be, based on some council review and other things that we've already discussed. The next thing on the agenda, housing production plan, 2024 to 2029, final review and vote for adoption.
Woody, sorry, you need another vote to set the public hearing date.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. All right. Let's see here.
So
I
the
didn't-
date
I'll
that
entertain-
has, sorry, just a reminder to the board, the date that has been set on the schedule that you've all seen is February 19th.
Yep.
And that is relative to the timing that's required for the referral from the select board. So your vote should be contingent on the select board referring these articles back to you, which is on their agenda for Tuesday, this next Tuesday, January 28th. So I think the vote could be motion to set the planning board public hearing date for the proposed zoning bylaw amendments for February 19th, 7:15 PM via Zoom, contingent upon the select board referring the amendments back to the planning board.
And I will make that motion.
I was just supposed to read it. Do I have a second?
Second,
All those in favor, roll call vote. Peter,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Mary,
yes.
Scott,
Yes.
and Steve, how do you feel?
I'm still good.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. Thank you for catching that, Kristen. Sorry.
That's
Now
okay.
we'll move on to the housing production plan, 2024 to 2029. Final review and vote for adoption. Um, board members, do you have any questions or comments on the housing production plan? Everyone's had a chance to read it, right? I'm seeing a few nods.
Yes, yes.
Are there any questions on it? Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I just wonder what the letter, is it Dave Powell? Can you send a letter making suggestions?
Yes, he did, and
Okay,
Is
are we
Dave-
supposed to do anything with that or just read it and?
that's up to the board.
And David's on the call, so.
Is
we could
David on the
invite
call?
him.
Yeah. David, would you like to speak?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, also I'll even appear, I think. Wait a minute, let me see if I can do this. There we go. Okay. Yeah, having been through a number of these over the years, I was concerned that essentially the requirements that the state has to do this have really changed very little in the last 2-3 decades. And when I reviewed what was in this particular production plan, the first thing that comes to mind is exactly what I've said at the beginning of the email that I asked Kristen to send to you all before this meeting, and that is that the word production is essentially, I don't know, say a misnomer, but it's a very unuseful and poor description of what this is, because towns in the current economy in which we work do have very little, if any, control over the production of housing. They only have control over the production of housing where they have a housing trust or a similar body that actually commissions the building of houses. And in the case of Newbury, Newbury is like many communities throughout the state, we don't have one, okay? Or in the case of communities that do have one, it is largely toothless. And so that's the first thing to be aware of, I think, that this essentially is a plan with no teeth, with no hands, with no tools, except the one set of tools that you have worked on and can be worked on, which is to take zoning so that it doesn't actually prevent various kinds of housing and in terms of their variety, and the accessory dwelling is one of the ones which is currently, the flavor of the month, and makes a lot of sense for our communities, a lot of others. There were a couple of other things which I found disturbing, and I know this is a hobby horse of mine, but I refuse to give it up. And that is that once again, we have a plan which describes this community in a way that is, in this case, probably the worst description I've seen in quite a long time. There is this continual notion that we are a community of 3 villages, which is just not the case. And so I drafted yet another attempt to define, or not define, but describe reasonably what you can expect when you come to Newbury, because you certainly will not find 3 villages. You'll be pushed to find 1, actually. Anyway, the other thing which was concerning to me was the really quite remarkable prediction of loss of population. I don't know whether any of you followed up on this, but the Donahue Institute that produced this information has a very important cavil at the beginning of their most recent report, which has to do with the fact that, among other things, the federal census that was done in 2020 because of COVID has all kinds of issues and problems, particularly as it relates to projected growth or loss, as the case may be. And so I felt that it was necessary to point out the fact that including that, particularly that graph and particularly that projection without any sort of, frankly, examination as to on what basis it was made, to talk about it coming from an institute which is okay, reasonably reliable, but not, as they say themselves, they can't know specifically, and they warn, in fact, that the further you go out, the less reliable their numbers are. So one of the things I felt was important was the picture that paints is not addressed in the plan. In other words, it would seem if we're going to lose 27% of our population, if you figure out how that might happen, what's going to happen to the structures which now don't have people in them? All right? Or how is that going to happen? What does that mean? And there's no discussion of that at all. So it seems to me that if you're including that as some kind of basis for looking up the plans that you should make in the future, there should be a discussion, or you shouldn't include it. So those were the three, I think, major things that I felt. And the final thing is that I have seen this well, not this particular one, obviously, but housing production plans arrive at regular intervals in Newbury, and with very few exceptions, they have resulted in precisely nothing. Nothing has happened. Nothing has come out of this at all, except recently, indirectly, yes, the change in zoning in terms of accessory stuff, etc. But that came from pressure of other kinds as well. And part of it is because we don't have, and we don't seem to have, well, we don't seem to have any expression as a community as to whether we want to have a housing trust of some kind. And this particularly came once again before the select board when the 61A issues of the last couple of things have come up, where it's clear that the town has no way and no plan and no kind of thought about, well, what do we do when we have an opportunity perhaps to acquire land either for conservation or, importantly, for housing? Well, if you don't have a vehicle to do it, and if you don't have, a savings bank account to help to fund that. And so those things have been, to my mind anyway, totally obvious for the last 30 years. And one of the reasons it hasn't happened is because we've had no leadership to do it. And I think, frankly, this board, among others, needs to exercise that leadership. And I think some of these issues began to come up in the last, 9, 12 months because of the MBTA zoning. And there were discussions at that time which indicated that the way in which any community, particularly within the MBTA envelope, is now on notice. And as we watch the court cases play out, that we're going to have to do something. And doing nothing is, I think, just a dereliction of duty. It really is. And I think I think all of the major boards and groups in the town who would be ultimately concerned with this and bringing this to the community need to start working on it. Otherwise, the housing production plan is essentially a chimera. It's forget it. And it's one of the things that it seems to me has happened too often, and that is, oh, well, we have one, we've done one, we have our 5-year plan, it's okay. It's not okay. It doesn't do anything unless you have a vehicle that you can use.
Well, Martha, let me ask you a question. Doesn't the state have serious consequences to a town for not doing what they say they're going to do with the housing?
Well, there are a couple of different things. I mean, the MBTA communities is one thing, and David was referring to that. And the court cases, there are serious consequences for communities that don't comply. In general, I think the housing the housing production plan lays out some strategies for increasing housing and affordable housing, which could ultimately help protect the town against 40Bs coming in. But that's really, if we don't have the 10% affordable housing that we're required to have, then that's really the consequence.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. And so it's, David, this is different because we will be brought to the mat as a town if we do not comply, like Milton. And we don't want to go through that, and we don't need to. I think all of us agree that there should be housing for, different kinds of people and allow those people to live in a nice place, and we can have some control over that. If we do this, isn't that the idea the state is throwing out here?
Sorry, are you asking me?
No, I'm just asking in the group. Isn't that the purpose of this whole, what we're doing all this for? Is to comply with the state mandate, but also to, in our hearts, in our, conscience, we agree that people need to live somewhere. And maybe Newbury doesn't have access, give them access to affordable housing. And this, I think some of the affordable housing units that have been presented are pretty nice.
Well, if I may comment, the housing production plan actually was dreamt up, oh boy, in the 80s, I think, maybe, if I'm not wrong, by the state as a methodology to determine whether, in fact, communities were doing something about moving towards the 10% 40B situation, because of the fact that back in the 80s, there were a lot of court cases involving people wanting to do 40Bs and communities saying no, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the state came up with the idea that, well, okay, let's provide something which essentially is a kind of thermometer, if you like, and that the community can point to and say, oh, well, we have our thermometer and we've hung it up on the wall, and right now, it indicates that it isn't quite hot enough, or however you want to put it, cold enough, maybe. And it is being used essentially as that way. It's a way of finding out, are you even thinking about it? Unfortunately, it hasn't included, are you doing anything about it? From my perspective, thinking about.
I think there are consequences. I mean, maybe I'm totally wrong, guys, but anyway, it's kind of a little too late because we're already in the weeds.
Well, my only reason for doing this is frankly because it's an opportunity to raise the whole issue very broadly of housing and how we can change, and how if we simply think that accompanying or accomplishing rather the plan and writing it up and passing it, that's not doing anything except that. And that's what's happened for the last 20, 30 years. So if you want to do that, fine.
I thought this was different. I thought this was consequential and statewide. Anyway,
Oh,
I don't think we have time for this discussion, Dave. You know, guys, I think this is a long-term discussion with a big overview and lots of moving parts, and we've already been down that road. No offense. I don't know. Speak up, guys. Don't let me hang my head out there, get chopped off.
Does anyone else have any comments on this? On, whether it be David's or on the housing production plan itself?
I'll just chime in on something on those graphs, you know, and projecting what's going to happen to housing and how we're not going to have any population here in 25 years. I don't think that's realistic. I think communities continue to stay alive. I think as people get older and they move on, they sell their homes and young families come in. And I think the population base of 6,600 will probably continue in this community as long as there are houses in this community, because there'll always be a need for homes. So when I was looking at that data, I just said to myself, okay. And I wasn't accepting it as what the true future will be. So to that, David, I am in agreement.
I find it hard to believe that the projections are accurate myself either. But that's what they project, and it's not 2050, so we'll see if it's true in 2050 is how I felt about it.
Just last thing, and then I'll shut up. I mean, we've presented this massive problem. Now, can we solve it, or is it just out there hanging out? I mean, there isn't any way right now, unless somebody can think about it, for us to change.
Well,
Well,
in my opinion, if I may say, the big thing we need is a housing authority, and we don't have one.
Oh, good idea. Yeah. Okay.
And how to go about doing that, I don't know. So,
Right.
Well,
it's
I
been
mean, the
just in the
plan
10
has an action plan in it, which you
Yeah.
guys have all seen. So I guess that's our plan, is to take action as
Yeah.
we've identified the needs in this document. And I do just want to mention for a few of you who have provided comments since the last meeting, the revised housing production plan, which I'll forward to David, because I know you have not seen it yet. It went out in the planning board packet, but it's not on the website yet, but it will be on the website. Is addressed some of the same concerns you've raised. MVPC explained the challenges of the Donahoe or Donahue data, and we address that somewhat, but it's problematic. I don't disagree with that, but there is more language here talking about how projections are just projections, and factors can change, and again, the strategies and actions that are identified towards the end of this document are intended to be modified living strategies
Right, right,
that
right, living,
adjust
yep.
to
Mhm,
the
that's
changes
it.
in the
Yep,
data.
living, breathing strategies, changing as they need to change with the times. And with the climate environment. Anyway, Woody, are we supposed to stop the meeting at a certain point?
We're doing the housing production plan. We're trying to get through it. I let David speak. I respect what David had to say in his email. And not knowing that David hadn't seen the latest one, I read it at 5 o'clock tonight. But I guess what are the wishes of the board with the housing production plan? If the board members don't have any comments or changes to it, I'd entertain some motions to move it along. And I'm not hearing anything.
Does everybody think there's more work to do? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing it.
Larry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so you're looking for a motion to what? Approve the housing production plan as drafted?
Yes, if there's no comments or questions from the board for any changes to it, yes.
Okay. Well, I'll make that motion.
Okay, good.
I'll second that motion.
I'll take a roll call vote. Peter,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes, thanks, Larry.
Scott,
Yes,
and Steve, how do you feel?
I'm neutral on this one.
Okay, I vote yes as well. So that brings us to the next item on the agenda. Liaison.
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go right
Can I
ahead,
just
Jeff.
mention, the select board will also be reviewing and voting to adopt or approve the housing production plan at their next meeting. And they actually will vote to submit it to the state. It has to get approved by Housing and Livable Communities, the state agency. So just note to all of you, if you're interested in attending the select board's discussion of the plan, that will be on the 28th. Thanks.
Okay. And then David, thank you for your comments, if you can still hear me.
Yes, thanks, David.
Thank you for listening.
Next item on the agenda, liaison and meeting reports. Larry, ZBA.
I don't have anything to report. They haven't met since our last meeting. They're meeting next Thursday night on the 30th.
Okay. Conservation met last night. There was an interesting discussion, public hearing on Lock and Road Dam, and on the next agenda there'll be something on 108 Main Street for extension and tolling. They need to extend their permit. And otherwise that was it. MVPC, Kristen?
There were 2 regional MVPC meetings since the last planning board meeting. Last week, there was a Merrimack Valley Housing Summit, which Daniel and I both attended on behalf of Newbury, which was a panel discussion and a sort of celebration of all the work that all the towns in the region have done on their housing production plans, which MVPC has helped with. So there were speakers from the state, from HCD. There was a very renowned zoning planner named Judy Barrett, who's done a lot of work on housing and zoning with communities, talking about everything we've been talking about tonight and everything in our housing production plan. So it was a great morning, and there's a lot of effort to help communities move forward on a lot of this work. So it's definitely something I would say Dan and I are pretty passionate about helping the town with, and look forward to working on all that with you and with the support of MVPC. And then today there was a MPO summit and retreat, which is the arm of transportation planning. And Daniel was able to attend that on behalf of Newbury. So some good work ongoing with MVPC.
Very good. And that leads us to planners report.
I can just
That's-
follow up again
That's
from,
it.
yeah, I was gonna say that's basically it, but there was some really good talk in terms of the Border to Boston trails today. A lot of communities are still involved in that. There was a lot of discussion. Mass DOT came tonight, or excuse me, this afternoon, to discuss the process on how getting projects looked at and reviewed quicker on the tip and things of that nature. So it was good. It was informative, especially for the planning world, to kind of get a better sense of what the MPO is all about. So it was good to go.
Thank you, Daniel. And then lastly, meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes of January 8th, 2025?
Yes,
Yes,
What do you wish? I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
So moved.
second,
Roll call vote. Pete,
Yes.
Larry,
yes,
Mary,
yes,
Scott,
Yes.
Steve?
A big yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. Unless anyone has anything else to say, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Pete,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Mary,
yes, yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Steve,
Aye, aye.
and I vote yes as well. And thank you, Martha, for attending the meeting tonight.
Thanks, Woody. Thanks, Martha.